Coming in at number 5, let me try to tighten this up here a little bit. Coming in at number 5, we have Big Daddy from Numenor, Elendil, the last king of Gondor and Arnor. Well, the last United King, right? It didn't split after him, or just split under Centaur. I thought it split with him, and I thought that one son took Gondor. It does. He's the last one. He's the last king of United Gondor and Arnor. We've already talked about him quite a bit in our discussion with Isildur.
Well,
he kills things. Well, let's talk about the other things that he does. He's the Fight 7 version of Isildur, obviously, who does not have the ring. And he gets free heroic combats from Narsil, which is awesome. Narsil is, of course, Master Forged, hand and a half, which means most of the time, once you actually get into fighting, you are using it two-handed. But as you are advancing across the field, you are totally carrying it one-handed with your shield.
Yes, you are, right?
So that you can be defense 8.
Yes.
And it turns out that you also want to fight one-handed if you are surrounded by strength 3 models and Gilgalad, because then you don't feel good about striking because you don't have an elven made weapon. Despite the fact that Narsil probably was elven made.
No, so Narsil is forged by a dwarf. Narsil is forged by a dwarf.
That's why it's Master Forged.
Yeah, and I forget the name of the dwarf. I would say the wrong word. I want to say Laffy, but I know that's wrong. That's a frost tribe.
It is also a dwarf.
But it's etched onto the sword when they do the engraving. So that one is dwarf made, is my understanding from the lore.
Okay, great. All right. So, but it's free heroic combats. If you are Fight 7, means that if you are running into Fight 3 warriors, you feint, you combat, you're going to keep the higher fight value, you're going to chop through people.
His sweet spot is warriors of any stripe, and he can kill any hero that he can beat in a fight. Like, there are no heroes that are safe. Even the defense 8 heroes. He's going to wound them on 5s.
I had the worst luck with him at Brawler Bash against Boromir. But
Sure.
that's because we were both Fight 7.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, at that point, it was like, well, whenever I struck, he struck.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually he was like, well, I'll just keep my might advantage because I can't crack your defense, 7. And for reasons that the math does not explain, I couldn't crack his defense 7 either.
Yeah.
So it was like, well, okay, that happens. But, and from experience, Elendil will always have one round where, he charges into like 2 orc trackers and cannot get higher than a 3, But absent that one turn, he will just chop right through the lines. He's really fun to use. Put him on a horse, give him the shields. He's 200 points, very expensive, but well worth it.
Yeah.
Well worth it on everything.
I guess we're operating under the assumption that only elves can be Lords of the West.
Yes.
I don't know. I kind of feel like, not that Elendil needs anything more. I feel like, though, if there was a non-elf who would qualify, it would be him.
Yeah. Save it for the Legion.
He doesn't have that, so.
We'll save it for the Legion.
It's a limitation. He's really good. He's really, really good.
He is, though, one of the best heroes in the game at continuing to resist magical power.
He is. Oh,
and,
yes. He's on the short list.
Unbending Resolve, we're going to see it on other people. You see the same kind of thing.
Oh, one more. Who's coming up.
Yeah. So we're coming to one more guy.
He's coming.
We've talked for Gimli and potentially Boromir in previous pods about how great they are from the Fortify Spirit innate that they can get from the Breaking of the Fellowship Legendary Legion. The fact that you can have these power heroes go plumb into enemy warriors and not have to worry about being turned off by a transfix because you're out of will is a huge benefit. And for him having 2 free and 3 in his store is just like, look, you really got to sink it into, or I really have to roll bad in order for this not to work. So he is great. It means that most magic casters just say, we'll try something else.
Eyesore time. So the 2 things he's lacking, he's got I guess there's 3 things. Overall profile is really great. He cannot take an armored horse, right?
Correct.
So that's thing number 1. That's again, we're parsing, but Dane's boar, his horse is not.
Yes.
If the enemy has a Legolas and Legolas wants to kill that horse is dead.
Even
now, he's still very good on foot. He's basically strength 7, anytime he wants to be. He's no worse than strength 5, as long as you don't shatter his sword, which is situational, but it happens occasionally. But that's the one, right? Is the horse. Only 1 fate, and he's good enough that I felt like he was top 10 with only 1 fate. I've only got 2 models that are 1 fate models in my top 10 because I feel like that's a real limitation.
For reference, because we didn't mention it, let's see, Centaur, you have him the lowest at 11.
Yeah.
And then Rythbryt, you have him at 8, and I had him at 6.
Correct, right.
So he ranked here at 5. He's basically where at least 2 of us thought he basically should be. And all of us.
I've got him 2 spots ahead of Dane because he is fight 7, and I think that matters. And I made the same thing for Boromir with the banner and Thranduil, and I got him 1 spot ahead of Isildur. And that's, again, I struggled with where to put Isildur. But I think on the whole, if you've got an army with a Numenor army with Elendil and a Numenor army with Isildur, I think the Numenor army with Elendil is slightly better. But the ceiling, I think you're consistently better with Elendil. I think your ceiling is higher, especially your skill cap ceiling. If you're a really good player, I think your ceiling is higher with Isildur. But
Centaur, you had him just behind Boromir and right in front of Gandalf the White. So don't feel like that's a bad place to be.
It really comes down to Boromir can strike 6 times. Elendil can strike 3 times. That was really what it came down to.
And look, if you take them with the banner, they're both fight 7, so that advantage, and that's his big advantage against most heroes, is he's fight 7.
I'm just barely better than you.
Yeah. I do want to touch on the third thing, no elven made weapon.
Yes.
And again, when you're trying to parse these heroes, for me, that was more of a deal breaker, I feel like. Not a deal breaker, but that was more of a tiebreaker for me than I know it was for some others, because if you're going to go into a big hero, if you go against troops, you don't care.
Right.
And Elendil is in his element, mowing down enemy troops, and then you deal with the heroes when you can, and you're kind of forcing them, even without fighting them, to burn might, because you're doing a free heroic every turn. You're killing 2 to 4 troops every turn, especially if you're mounted, which you can be. It's an advantage he has over Isildur, be at full power on the horse, if the horse makes it into combat. And so you can sort of cheat that out. And if you're fighting a fight 6 or below hero, and they're out of might by the time they come to fight Elendil, because you've been pressuring them to keep up the kill count, because you're just going, balls to the wall the whole time, then that's great. But if you end up fighting those rare heroes who are fight 6 or fight 7 or higher with an elven made weapon, he will struggle to beat those heroes in a fight. Yeah, if he wins the fight, he has as good a chance of anybody as killing them. But that's where he's, again, it's small things, small hairs, splitting hairs here. But
if no one has any other thoughts on Elendil,
let's do the next one.
Speaking of fight 7 with an elven made weapon, at number 4 we have Glorfindel, Lord of the West.
4.
At number 4.
Number 4.
Now the interesting thing, of course, is that I had Elendil at 6 and Glorfindel at 7. I thought they were basically the same, but one of them gets 2-handed weapon for free, the other one does not.
Yeah, we both disagreed with you for completely different reasons.
Elendil, on your ranking, Rythbryt, got number 8.
Yep.
And Glorfindel was number 12.
Number 12.
I assume that the Master Force 2-hander has something
it's
to do with it.
Glorfindel has, so Glorfindel picks up the 12-inch mount, which is awesome.
Yeah.
He's got Horse Lord, which is awesome, especially given that he has 3 fate, which is awesome. He caps out at defense 7, which is not as good as defense 8, but you are immune to brutal power attacks from monsters, so he's actually better at dealing with a strength 7 or above monster than Elendil is, ironically enough, with the 2 fate points on top of that. And he has the elven made weapon, which you can 2-hand with. But that 2-hand is not free, and it is not from strength 5. So for me, and you do not have the free heroic combats. So whereas Elendil's sweet spot is troops and he's good at fighting heroes, I feel like Glorfindel is okay fighting heroes, but he gets bogged down. He's really in his element fighting troop, let me reverse that. Glorfindel is not really in his element fighting troops. He can get bogged down fighting troops. He's sort of overqualified to kill troops. But he can kill troops because he's strength 4.
Yeah.
He really wants to be fighting heroes because he's fight 7 with an elven-made weapon and he can strike. But he's not particularly good at killing heroes unless you two-hand, which is hurting your ability to win the fights.
Yeah.
Or you do the heroic strength, which he can do, which is, again, like Boromir, probably the best situation for him. And if you get up to strength 6 or 7, the odds are you probably will. With the strength, that's good enough, but you're capped at 2, maybe 3 turns you can do that. He is Lord of the West. You do get to re-roll. So that's good. You get to re-roll the duel. You get to re-roll the dice to wound. So that's all good. And you can roll the 8 dice if you knock down something. But he lacked +1 to wound. And so I've got him ahead of the other models that don't have a +1 to wound, which is Thranduil at 14 and Boromir at 13. I have Glorfindel at 12. I have him behind all the other models that have +1s to wound, starting at Helm at 11. And I think Helm is better at killing things with the extra points of might, with the free heroic combat. And yes, he's not as good at beating heroes in fights, but if he beats a hero in a fight, he's got a much better go at killing them. And I know that's arbitrary, but that's how I sorted it out.
That makes sense.
And Elendil is better than Helm because he's fight 7.
Yes. Yeah. I did evaluate Glorfindel two-handed. And I assumed that if you were to charge into someone like Shagrat, you would two-hand. Because why not? You know, try to kill him in one go, because this is a nasty chap that we have to deal with. I think going two-handed, it's the same reason that we were talking about with Elrond. Because you're a Lord of the West, if you're on the charge, and especially if you're in range of a banner, you are rolling so many dice.
You are.
It is okay to go two-handed, right? And on the day that we filmed this, we had a post go up on the Assault upon Helm's Deep Legendary Legion. And I think Uruk-hai captains are really good with two-handed weapons. But that uber captain that they get that gets that 3rd dice is really good with a two-handed weapon. Because anytime you can get more dice, that counteracts the penalty you're actually going to feel from getting the -1.
Yeah.
Right? And so
fair.
I do think that Glorfindel winning fights is not as bad when he's two-handed. I do think that even with the +1 to wound, he still struggles to win things.
Yep.
And we've seen Glorfindel. I've used Glorfindel a few times, never mounted. I'm going to get my mount in the fall, my mounted version in the fall. Thank you goodness for sending him back into the web store. But I'm going to get him. We're going to see if it changes. But I'll tell you this, on foot, he does not kill things.
No,
it's the same problem
really
Boromir has.
Yeah.
He really just doesn't kill things. And when you're surrounded, that two-handed weapon, especially if you're down to 1 might point left, you're really hesitant to actually go two-handed. So eventually, he is not two-handing, and that's when the killing stops.
Yeah.
So I was okay having him at 7. I had him above guys like Thranduil, who couldn't two-hand.
Yep,
I had him slightly above Elrond, but the other guy, like, I didn't have him anywhere close to Dan.
Yeah, I have him above Elrond as well, and I think that's fair. But I mean, again, we're in top 4 land, right? So like the models, like these are monsters, right? Is he better at wounding stuff and killing stuff and winning fights than Beorn or Gwaihir or Treebeard? Is he better than Dane? Is he? I mean, these are really good models to deal with. So
I had him as high as number 3. Everything you guys said is correct.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, it starts out for starters. He has.
And I assume it's going to be largely the intangibles,
Yes.
which he has a lot
Yes.
of really
He's got
good intangibles.
a ton of those.
Yeah.
For starters, he has heroic challenge, which means he can get more might back. This is a start. It's not great.
It's a start.
But when you think about it,
It's a start.
for models that have challenge, if you're going to call a heroic challenge, you would prefer to be, first of all, a Valor hero as opposed to a Legendary.
You would.
Because it does increase the number of people you can challenge. Second, you would prefer to be fight 7 than what
You would.
most people are, which is like fight 5, maybe fight 6.
Absolutely true.
Because now, whoever you challenge, especially at Valor level, which is a surprising number of fight 5 people, there's a chance that even if they decide, oh, well, they're going to challenge me, I'm going to call, say, heroic strike. One, they may not actually strike up to more than your fight value. If they tie your fight value or are lower, you have the oven made weapons, you're already looking pretty sweet.
Yep.
You have Lord of the West on top of all of this, so like there's and then potentially a banner roll. So, like, so you're doing okay.
That's all true.
If you have to call a heroic challenge, it's great to heroic challenge from a horse than not from a horse.
Yep,
because you want to win as quickly as possible.
Or you at least don't want to be on a disadvantage if you're challenging somebody who's mounted.
Exactly. So all of that is helpful.
All true.
And if you have to call a heroic challenge and they outstrike you and they win the roll-off, you would prefer to be defense 7 with 3 wounds, 3 fate, and not have to worry even if you challenge a monster to them doing monstrous brutal power attacks.
All true.
So, first of all, I would contend this is like the best challenge guy in the game. So I'm just going to start there. And I gave that something because it means you could have 5 might points, which is pretty good on a fight 7 dude, assuming you spend 1 to challenge, you kill the guy immediately, you roll the d3, and you get a 6 or a 5.
Correct.
Hypothetically, you can get pretty darn high. Okay, so there's a ceiling here that I feel like a lot of people aren't ranking, and that's fine because I realize that's a small percent chance of a ceiling. But as somebody who plays against a decent amount of Isengard, which has a lot of fight 5 easy to kill heroes that are Valor, because you've got like
there's a couple.
I mean, Lurtz, Mahur,
Not Mahur.
Ugluk.
Not Mahur.
Oh, I'm sorry.
A lot of those guys are 40 guys.
Yeah.
But anyway, so
Lurtz, you've got Lurtz and Trident. Lurtz and Trident in the Legion.
Yeah.
So never mind. Not even Trident. It's Lurtz.
Yeah. Anyway, so
but
like,
there are some
there.
cheap, like all of the fiefdoms guys.
Yeah.
You
So
challenge all the fiefdom guys. You go up to doing here like
so your options
challenge.
You got So like you've got options, and I feel pretty good about that.
He's gonna decline that challenge by the way.
Yeah, well, so I was gonna say,
But here's the deal, like
He has something else.
even if they decline the challenge, right?
No, there's no good
Still-
situation if doing here declines the challenge.
yeah, actually
You're
there
still
is.
Actually,
there
you're still
is.
winning ties. You're still probably killing him outright.
No, because Dune here has heroic defense.
Oh, that's a good point.
So he just says, "Oh, you challenge me, I decline. I call it defense."
Yeah.
And I hope that on the next turn I can bail him out.
Yeah,
Right.
no, there's
And
no
it's like, all right,
no good
I took a
situation.
might point
Yeah.
away from you. You are not going to get might
Yeah.
for killing me. You are not, I can't call heroic shoots anymore to help my archers, but you're in my face.
Right.
I wasn't shooting anyway.
Not gonna shoot anymore. And if I accept the challenge, I have to charge you, and you have to charge me, and no one's gonna be
And
shooting.
no one's going to be shooting anymore, so who
Yeah,
cares?
why do we care?
As I
Before
said,
you, when you're done with the
only-
challenge, I will tell you a story.
My only response to that is, again, as I said, it's a ceiling. It's a
Yeah.
small percent chance on a ceiling. And sure,
No,
Doing
I
your-
I
Let's go ahead and
agree.
say something, and then I have something to say
I
about
agree
heroic
that
challenge.
he is about as good a hero as you could get. I think Aragorn is a better hero for challenge,
Sure.
but it's for all the reasons except he can actually wound stuff that you want to challenge.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean,
So, and Gorfin is going to have a harder time than Aragorn at wounding whatever you're challenging most of the time, unless you're challenging like Galadriel. Which you could do.
She also can call it
I would
defense.
feel pretty
She
good
can also-
about it though
yeah,
against
do that.
Unless,
Galadriel.
no, actually, no.
So that's what I'm saying, but everybody
Not the
feels.
Lothlorien kind,
Yeah.
because if she has her mirror, you're never killing her,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, maybe.
right?
You're
right?
probably not killing.
Right? Because she's
Not
just going to call
Glorfindel.
defense for as long as
Glorfindel's
she-
not killing.
Well,
Glorfindel's not going to kill.
All I'm saying is just going to
Well,
prolong
that's
the
not true.
challenge.
If he's on the horse and
Yes.
he's charged and he's getting the 8, he
He's
only
probably
needs
getting 1 or 2.
6
Yeah,
4s.
6 fours
Unlikely.
after she runs out of might.
which
Because if
Right,
she
because
keeps
he's
calling
defense.
defense, again, she's just
Sure.
going to stall.
No, I agree.
So-
I agree.
but with a challenge, you can run a person out of might, right? Because you're going
Oh,
to
you
keep
can.
going in there until
Oh, you
it's
can.
done, right? So
Yeah. No, you can do it.
I'm
Yeah.
fine with that.
Anyways,
The
go ahead.
you have a story to tell.
I do.
Why don't you
I
tell your
actually
story,
had a
and then I
heroic
have a thing
challenge
on
called on
challenge.
me the other day.
Really?
I was playing Red Jacket, getting ready for a tournament. I won't spoil the. Well, we're not going to put this up before this weekend.
Yeah, probably.
This is the tournament. So he was playing with the twins because he's got this army, and I took the Return of the King Legion, and it was a Maelstrom deployment thing. So the twins came on one side, and Elrond came on the other side because he wanted to practice game. He wanted to see what would happen if the two of them got separated, and. So, and then I brought my guys on. It's an 800 point list. So I had Aragorn, and I had the King of the Dead, and I had Gimli, and I had Legolas, and I had about 20 guys, dead guys with them, and a few riders and whatever stuff. And they all came on together because it turns out you can do that if you got all the might and you're willing to spend all that might to do that. And I basically attacked the twins warband with all my guys. I got them surrounded. And we got into the second round of combat after the dead and Aragorn had, cleared out a bunch of elves, which, no knock on Red Jacket's play. This is just what happens when the dead go into, a whole group and you outnumber them 2-1. But I killed one of the twins. And then I forget who. Aragorn, I think. Aragorn killed one of the twins. And then on the next turn, I charged Aragorn and Gimli and the King of the Dead and a rider and had a couple spearmen as well into the second twin. And then the twin called a challenge because he has to call a challenge. And I thought to myself, oh, you know what? He can't strike. So I'm going to strike with Aragorn. I'm going to have the higher fight. He is trapped because I've surrounded him. I'm going to win this fight. And I'm gonna kill this dude. And I'm gonna he's basically giving me free might points to Aragorn. Like, this is like great. And Aragorn has like 1 might left, or he's going to after I call the strike, because I called a free heroic move at the beginning of the turn. I'm like, okay, well, this is great. So I call the strike. I roll a 4 high. I got 1 might point left. And he rolls the 6. I'm like, word I can't say. And so I lose the fight. He doesn't do any wounds. I spend the next, because
there's a challenge.
It's a challenge, so it's just Aragorn on the twin. Right. So the king is standing there not doing anything. Gimli is standing there not doing anything. The horseman is standing there not doing anything. We went 3 rounds. I could not win a fight against this twin. He took off a wound and all the fate points and everything. It was like, oh my gosh. So, moral of the story, the challenge is a trap. Don't accept the challenge, because what I should have done was to say, no, decline.
We have
strike all the dudes. We're going to get a 6. He's going to die.
The end.
I overthought it. So, I agree with you. Glorfindel, great at winning challenges. Nobody's going to accept challenges.
Yeah, and tying into that, thank you for bringing that up. At the end of 2020, December 2020, I did a review of November and December 2020. I did a review of the 8 specialized heroic actions.
Yeah, here we go.
And in the first list, I was like, it's like when I said the top 5 heroes for the forces of good, I was like, we're not even going to consider models where you look at them and you're like, that guy's going to be hard to kill. They're going to kill me, so not doing it. So people like Thror and Durin, who are almost impossible to kill, you're not going to accept the challenge from them. You're like, no, I don't want to go back and forth with you on this. Guys like Elendil, Gil-galad, Glorfindel, almost every version of Aragorn, you're like, why? Why would I put myself through this?
Yeah.
Right? The only person who might is someone like Thror or Durin who wants to say, right, you're just looking at me. Right? Yeah. Glorfindel, you want a challenge? Fine. Bring it. You're just fighting me. This whole game is just going to be me and you doing nothing. That's all it's going to be. And I'll just count on my army raking through the rest of you. But I was like, people like Theoden, who are tempting targets, if they issue a challenge, you might actually say yes.
Sure.
Because you're like, oh, 2 wounds, defense 7, 1 fate point. Sure, I'll take on Theoden, right? And it turns out Theoden actually hits like a truck. So, surprisingly so long as he lives through the first turn. Guys like Theodred, same thing, right? I mean,
that is the thing.
I can beat Theodred on the turn he's not striking. That's fine, right? I mean, and so I think those guys are actually better at challenging because they look innocuous and are good. And while Glorfindel, there are certainly models that he can challenge that I think people would accept just because they don't want Glorfindel doing anything else.
Sure.
I think most people would just say no.
Anyways, you had lots of other reasons, though.
I do have lots of other reasons. I will close up the challenge by saying, again, as I said, this is a ceiling. It's a small percentage of chance that this is going to happen. I will say this about kind of to close out the challenge side of things. Okay. The models who would accept it would be things like monsters, because they're still feeling okay about wounding him, and they're still like, Glorfindel, he's not actually going to wound me on defense 8. So I do think it's going to happen more often for Glorfindel than we may immediately imagine, because we're going to assume models will say, I won't accept it, because they're the models who would never accept any challenge ever anyway. Yeah. Okay, so all that being said, we don't need to
the risk with challenge is that you can't strike.
On the first
So
turn,
the
right?
the
Yeah.
universe of models that you want to challenge are fight 6 or below models who either cannot strike or are out of might, or who only have 1 might left, and you're like, well, okay, if they strike, then they got to roll better than me, and preferably they're lower than fight 7, and you might even get lucky and they might fail their strike roll or whatever else, and you're like, well, I'm gonna roll more dice than you, and I'm gonna hit the reroll, and I've got might left to make this work. But yeah, but the universe of those heroes of valor who can't strike is relatively small. So
Yeah.
anyways, that's more than anybody said about challenge in a while.
I think so.
Yeah.
Probably since I wrote my article and got people
Yeah.
talking about it again.
Mhm.
Also.
There is a
Very
sweet
good
spot.
first, folks.
There is a sweet spot for it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But anyway, I mean, there's more stuff we can talk about. Obviously, like, you know, I want to keep this relatively short because I'm sure the kids want to know about who's coming up next. But the fact that Asphaleth is a 12-inch horse, as opposed to a 10-inch horse, is huge.
Yep.
The fact that you get Fleetfoot, which means you can,
Yep.
again, it's more reliable, as you guys can probably tell. Like, I value things like fight value, the elven-made weapon, reliability, and how stable a person is. Glorfindel is very, very stable.
3 feet
Well,
with
people
horse
may
sword,
say-
too.
Yeah. 3 fate with
Yeah,
horse.
which means you're actually going to have your horse by the time you're done with it. And yes, like I hear the arguments about, oh, it's only strength 4, and you can only get a +1 to wound if you take a -1 to the fight. I don't know. I feel like, I guess if you really felt like you needed it, you can always call strength.
You
Technically.
can. Yeah. No, that's
So
true.
it's like
That's on the
he
table.
has options for it, and I feel like the options are good. The big thing for me is just that, like, and this is what pushed him ahead of a number of other guys, like say the Helm Hammerhands and the Dans of the world, is that there are very specific things where either of those characters, lots of characters in the game really don't really like the idea of what happens if I lose.
Mhm.
For Glorfindel on the whole, he's feeling okay if he loses. Like, he's not feeling great about it, but there's no really, really massive counters other than, like, you know, I guess siege weapon to the face, I guess. You know.
Yeah.
But
That's true. He has built-in protections against the things that thwart most of these heroes.
Yeah.
He's largely immune to monsters. They can still wound him with regular strength on defense, but his defense is high enough, it's usually going to be 4s.
Yeah.
Unless you get to like a strength 9 uber monster, right?
Right.
And he's basically immune to magic.
especially if Lindir is within 6 inches,
Right.
granting him a 3rd free dice every turn.
And then with Horse Lord and 3 fate points, he's one of those rare heroes like Aragorn who can actually keep the horse alive all the way into combat. Now, Asphaleth's not armored, right?
Correct. It's just
But even so, you got the 3, right? So, like, the enemy can shoot a Glorfindel. They can try to take out the horse. Yeah, but you're not going to be nearly as effective at trying to take out that horse as you would be against most of the other heroes. So that's all true.
Summary.
That's all true. Yep. He's great. He's very, very good.
Number 3, we have Aragorn Strider.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Big surprise there.
Big surprise. He's got the mighty hero all the time. You don't need to take him in a specific list. He's always got it.
Yep.
You know, I mean, Aragorn's one of those models. You bring him because he's fun to use, and he does the work. I evaluated him from the Fellowship. I gave him the horse. I gave him the armor. I gave him the bow. I gave him Underill because it scored better than the Legendary Legions.
Yeah.
Um,
He's very good in the Legions, especially the Legions where he gets on the road for free, but his max damage potential is always going to be on the horse.
Did you consider running him from the Ranger so he gets the banner reroll from Halbarat?
I did not assume that people would be in range of banners unless they had them innately.
Gotcha.
You
That's
could
fine.
get the
That's
exact
fine. I
same
was
score with
just
a better
curious.
thing by having Halbrod near it. That was
Yeah.
cool.
And I mean, you know, to be fair, right? Like all these models pretty much can have banners, so
So, yeah.
the advantage is going to wash.
Yeah.
Basically. So
And it devalues people like Boromir, who's
Mhm.
like, well,
I
I have
have
a
it.
choice between reducing my damage output and having a banner, or doing that. And if you say, well, everyone gets to be in range of a banner, then there's no reason to give Boromir the banner except for the Fate 7,
Right.
because you're like, well, I want the lance.
Yeah.
I mostly mention it only because, if I'm not mistaken, the Fellowship has no option for a banner.
That's right.
Correct?
It does not.
So
Well, no, that's not true.
Well,
You
if you're
can take
within
Bill.
Bill, right.
Build a pony, and if there's a hobbit in your fight.
Right, yeah. So
But yes, it's
I'm-
not a traditional
Generally
banner.
speaking,
However,
there's a small number of
Fellowship
armies.
can ally with like any number of elves that have banners.
Rivendell,
So if you want a banner, you can get a
innately,
banner.
and, well, historically.
I merely mention it here because, you know, I mean, there are a small number, but there are a number, you know, Goblin Town, others come to mind, where they don't get banners, right? And so,
Sure.
at least for me, as I was reviewing Slayers, I was like, okay, if you have access to a banner, I at least want to nod to the fact that you have access to it. And then, of course,
Sure.
I put a premium on if you have it all the time, or whether it's a situation
Right.
bonus.
Pro
But
tip,
everybody can conveniently ally with elves, so
Yeah.
everybody can get a banner. So.
pro tip, Aragorn gets better with a banner.
He does.
There you go.
And Aragorn that's coming that has his own banner
Right.
did
Does
better.
great.
Better.
You know.
Yes, he
Yeah,
did.
he's coming.
Yeah.
We're only down to 2. You know who they are.
Yeah. So Strider, of course, I had to. He is the model that I had to recompute
Yep.
because I didn't finish updating his profile when I gave him the horse.
Yeah.
And that changed a lot.
It does.
So he finished number 8 for me. He was number 5 for you, Centaur. He was number 3 for you, Ray.
He was. Yep.
I assume this is mostly due to Mighty Hero. It is not due to his defense 6.
Oh no.
Right?
No. This is because of Onderil.
Yes.
Oh, this is because of
Onderil. Now look, everything else in the profile is awesome. Mighty Hero is great. He's a member of the quintuple 5, the 5 triples club.
Yeah.
But it's Onderil.
Yeah.
He can wound anything in the game on a 3+.
Right.
And if you put him on the horse, that's 8 dice to wound any infantry model in the game with 3+, or any trapped infantry model in the game, including monsters,
And you
on a
have
3+.
any model.
I mean,
Well, not a cavalry model.
If it's trapped, you still double
6.
dice.
6 dice. You don't get
because
the
you're not getting
+1
the
dice from the charge.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So no, any infantry model trapped or knocked down, 8 dice, 3s to wound. And if you feel extra fancy, feint.
Yeah.
Rerolling 1s. Like there is almost nothing in the game that can do that.
Yeah.
So the other stuff's great. Horse Lord's great. Fight 6 with an elven made weapon, but and under is the elven made weapon as well, right? So it's all that as well. You're great at winning fights. You're great at killing basically anything.
Just not Master Forged.
Not Master
It would
Forge.
be broken if
No.
it was.
No,
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and
but you got a free point of might.
exactly.
If you want to do it.
So-
If you don't need to strike, if you don't need to
Yep.
heroic move, you can always just say, hey, if I get the 6 and it goes down to a 5 and I need the 6, because that's the other thing, you may not, then I can always bump it up.
His eyesore stat is defense 6 or 5 if you don't take the armor. If you're taking Strider, you're going to take the armor basically every time because you get the added protection from the arrows, which is the big thing, and it's nice against strength 3 troops to have them wound you on 6s. But having played with him from the Return of the King Legion a fair bit recently, the defense 5 is fine as long as you don't lose fights.
Right.
And he does not lose very many fights. You know, even in the Legion, the Broken Fellowship.
Yep. Oh,
he's
yeah.
a bear.
He is a bear to fight.
Bear to take out.
No Andril on that list. And
No honor.
still
He's
incredibly
still a
hard to
bear.
fight.
He's still a bear. Yeah.
More on that later.
Well,
There you go.
Aragorn is great. He is not number 2 though.
He is not.
Because at number 2 we have Mr. Fight 9 himself, Gil-galad, High King of the Elves
Yep.
from Rivendell.
We do.
This guy will probably show up in whatever Second Age Last Alliance Legion is created. He is, of course, defense 7 innately, but can be defense 8 with a shield, which you should always give him.
Yeah. There's no
Because-
reason not to.
Yeah.
There's no reason not to, because while Elendil has to choose whether to be defense 7 while 2-handing or defense 8 while 1-handing, Gil-galad gets +1 to wound from a spear, which he does not wield with 2 hands.
Right.
So you can be defense 8 and +1 to wound
Yep.
all the time.
Just do that. Just do it all
Just
the
do
time.
It's 5 points. It's, green stuff, or just grab a shield from, one of your, random spearmen that you got. Easy. This is so easy. Or, from a Rivendell Knight or something like that, right? Do something, give him the shield. He, of course, has Blood and Glory, which is a great way to get might back
Yeah.
if you can trigger it,
Mm-hmm.
which, I haven't used Gil-galad much. I have used Shagrat a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes killing those heroes or multi-wound models is just a pain.
Yeah.
Really hard to do. It depends on what your draw is.
Yeah.
Gil-galad has a good shake at it. Like 9 +1 to wound at strength 4. That strength 4 is the eyesore stat for his offensive profile.
Right. But
No way
he's
to get
basically
+1.
strength 6.
He's
Yeah.
effectively
Because he
strength
got
6.
the +1 from the spear.
He will still kill lots of things.
Yeah.
He does not kill as well as some of these other people that we're looking, that we've looked at, who are strength 5 with +1 to wound, or guys like Aragorn, of course, who can wound on 4s or 3s, regardless of what your defense is.
Yeah.
The big monsters, of course, who can wound on 4s or 3s. I mean, with strength 4, it's pretty easy for him to get stuck on some upper end high defense.
Well, yeah. So like defense 7, he's gonna need
defense
5s, right? Like that's
Defense 7
an
is
8. He'll need 5s, right? So that's about the worst you're gonna see. I mean, if they're cavalry models, you may struggle to kill them. But if they're infantry models and you're rolling 8 dice,
You probably got
5s is usually good enough, especially with Lord of the West, because you're re-rolling at least one of those.
Yeah.
So I didn't worry so much about his +1 to wound. I had him ranked the lowest out of everybody. I have him at 7.
I had him at 5, and then you had him at number 2.
number 2.
Number 2, yeah.
Number 2.
So the reason
Yeah.
I have him behind the 3 monsters,
Mhm.
and I have him behind Strider, and I have him behind the number 1 model who's coming up, and I have him behind the Champ's Chariot. And it's everything about his profile is great. He's got the oven made weapon, he's got the fight 9, he's got blood and glory to regenerate might points, he's a member of the 4 3s club. It's the 1 fate point.
Yeah.
And it's the horse.
Yeah.
Which again is a normal horse. That horse is probably the most targeted horse in the entire game, because if you got a hero who's fight 9 with a +1 to wound and blood and glory with an oven made weapon, you do not under any circumstances want that hero to get to you mounted, and he can't do anything about that. So I think most of the time, if you bring any sort of range component at all, he's probably on foot.
Yeah.
And he's very good on foot.
Mhm.
He's not better than Beorn or Treeboard or Gwaihir for me on foot. And he's not better than Strider or the Chariot, which are unlikely to be on foot when they reach him. So,
yeah.
But he's good. He's very, very good.
The fight 9 is nice insurance. It means you don't really have to strike.
Yeah.
Unless you want to guarantee it, which in my mind is kind of a waste in most cases.
Yeah.
If you're worried about being beaten by something, you just call it defense instead.
Yeah.
Which he has.
Mhm.
And so, the rest of the time you're like, well, so actually when I evaluated Gil-galad, because if you listen back to one of the earlier things, or if you read the write-up that I did on my framework, I assumed that Shagrad only got to fight 9. And I went, well, is it better for me to call a strike at strength 4? Or not call a strike, win with advantage on roll-offs, and call a strength instead.
Mm-hmm.
And the only reason that he got to number 5 for me over people like Aragorn and Elendil is because he wasn't strength 4. He was strength 6. Yeah. And I was like, that's
with a +1
with a +1 to wound.
Yeah.
That kills things.
Yeah.
That kills a lot of things.
You get to 4s or 3s against anything.
This is one of the few models in the game that I think benefits more from a strength than from a strike.
Oh, I think that's probably true.
And it's good that he can call it if you're concerned about it.
Right.
Like if you're fighting the Balrog, you want to call it because you're like, well, he is fight 10, right? So let's get to fight 10 with the Elven Mage Weapon and give us the edge, right? But it's a risk. It's a risk if you're calling with anyone else. You may just be like, well, I got to fight 10. And unlike almost every other model we're talking about right now, he does not have a sword, which means if you do make it to fight 10 and your opponent is fight 5 and only gets to fight 6, you can't feint to reroll once. So you're stuck with the paying 1 might for an extra fight value that you didn't need. So yeah, he's a great hero. I love this guy. I don't like that he lacks the tactical options that Elrond does. Yeah. So when given the choice between one of them, I default to Elrond.
Interesting.
But he obviously is great at killing things. I fought him at Brawler Bash twice. I fought both of the armies that brought him. It was horrible.
Oh yeah.
He is a really good hero.
Yeah.
But here's my number 5.
You need a top tier. You either need a top tier hero to deal with him, like top tier, or you need just sort of overwhelming high powered shooting.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, or magic.
Or Braga.
Well, Braga's not going to kill him.
but he'll hold him up for a very
Maybe.
long time. So
Maybe.
you might still win.
Right, sure. Okay, right. So, any goblin hero with heroic defense
Which
could do it, which,
is
the
a
two.
small number. Yeah.
There's
There's actually a fair
large-
number of goblins.
Groblog
Groblog can do it.
Gerbers both
Gerbers can
have
do it,
it.
yeah. Anyways,
I mean, there's no trouble.
That's what I'm saying.
yeah, he's really, really, really good. I feel like we should also mention, so he's got the upgrade you would take on elves,
Yes.
where you can give all the elves in his warband fight 6
For 1 point.
for 1 point.
That is
I feel like,
ridiculous.
I'm certainly not the first person to do that. That's really valuable to have that. There's no reason, if you're gonna pay almost 200 points to take him, and you're gonna pay almost 200 more points to bulk out his warband, just pay an extra 18 points and make them all fight 6.
To touch on one more thing, only because we talked about it earlier, I mentioned before that the one thing I was leery about lances is how swingy they are. It
Mhm.
matters whether you're on the charge or not. If you think of Gilgalad as always having a lance that he gets to use, whether he's on the charge
Yeah.
or not on the charge, or on horse
Mhm.
or not on
Not a
horse,
yep.
he always gets it. But then on top of that, if for whatever reason you're concerned about his survivability, you put him in the second rank, and he's still contributing his fight 9.
Yeah, that's true. He can
still
he can
attack.
spear support.
He can
a
spear
cavalry
support,
model.
right? So it's
Or an infantry
not
model.
like it's
That's true.
not great, but he can, right? If you really are concerned,
Just don't do it against a monster who can hurl.
Exactly, or Sauron who can attack guys in the second rank. But there are ways obviously to
Yeah.
deal with it. But in his case, I feel
Well,
like
I mean, you would think about it against Sauron because that's only 1 strength 8.
Yeah.
Against
That's
from
true.
Sauron
That's true.
instead of the 4 that you may take.
which could be lethal.
Or he could set you ablaze,
That is,
which
Also
would also be bad.
and then on top of that, of course, toward the concerns that everybody has about the fate story, obviously, we're not going to go down the rabbit hole of, well, he can ally with people who can give him fate back or anything else like that. I will say this,
Yeah.
he is in an army with somebody who you very well may take who can restore his wounds.
Yeah.
So at least he has the option. Unfortunately, you probably don't want to take him with Lindir, which would give him the resistance to magic as well, which would be really nice. But
Yeah.
at least the guy has options for covering bases. So while he definitely has bases that need to be covered, you're not out of options.
And you can take him with Kierden, right? So
Yes.
he's
Yeah.
not on the list of
Yeah.
models that
So
you can't take.
The
with him.
shooting, at least, you've got good options against that.
It's not the twins and it's not.
It's not the
Arwen, right?
twins, it's not Arwen,
It's not Lindir, and it's not Bilbo.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Third age stuff.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That
The
makes
other thing too, which I completely forgot about, I pulled up the erratas for this. If you include Gilgalad, you're of course impossible allies with everyone except Numenor, who's
Mhm.
historical.
Yeah.
But you also have Lothlorien, Fangorn, and the Misty Mountains as convenience,
Mhm.
which means that while I think most of the time you'd be running either pure Rivendell with Gilgalad or Last Alliance with Numenor and stuff, if you wanted to provide some kind of better protection for him,
Yeah,
you could ally with Lothlorien,
you could.
right? Bring,
It's a
Galadriel
good
or
faction.
something for the
Yeah.
blinding light with more people to carry. You could bring in, more fight 6 troops.
Yep.
Besides just the people in his war bands, right?
Yep.
So
Bring some Rivendell Knights from
Radagast for
your
a cheaper Rivendell if you
contingent,
really
make
wanted
those
it.
factions better. Yeah.
yeah. And you could bring him with any of the big monsters that we've talked
Yep.
about today.
You can. You can. Yep.
At which
absolutely.
point, one of them is overqualified for second slot.
Well, I think
Clearly.
or Gilgalad is
Clearly,
Gilgalad is too.
either Gilgalad or a
Yeah.
big monster that you bring is clearly overqualified.
And Gilgalad plus another supporting model, if it's Elrond or Glorfindel or whoever, even Celeborn, will kill most other heroes if you can get both of them into here. Even the monsters, he's the one model where they're like, okay, well now he's higher fight and he has the elven made weapon. Yeah, he's only got the one fate, so if we win the fight, we're feeling good. Beorn is like, yeah, I got this guy. I just got to squeeze him to death. But you may not ever get the chance because he's got everything that you'd want to win fight.
And Beorn would actually be impossible allies because he's not in
Right.
Misty Mountains. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
But the other two monsters.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, well, he is the highest rated elf.
Yeah, highest rated elf. And I guess we should just wrap up here with
Yeah.
number one. We got
Number
Aragorn,
one.
King of Lesar. You knew it. We knew it. Mostly because someone didn't rank the chariot high enough, and I didn't rank.
Well,
the
he
chariot
would have. It
It's
would
an
have been
equipment option
highest
choice.
even with the
Yes,
chariot
it's an
being
equipment
ranked.
option choice.
Yeah.
He is clearly better than the models that we've been talking about for much the same reason that Aragorn is one of those models that's better than a lot of the models we've talked about.
Yeah. This is better than Strider.
This
He
is
just-
Strider
he is.
with defense 7
Yep.
instead of defense 6. No bow, no heroic accuracy. Don't need him.
He's on an armored horse,
And a 6-inch banner that helps all friendly models,
including himself.
including himself.
Yep.
So I mean, he's and the option for the armored horse instead of the normal
Yep.
horse, which has been one of the things we've been highlighting is ice stats for a lot of these big heroes.
In the army bonus, you get Courage 7, which is insane. That's really good. It's really, really good.
And he's 240 points max.
He's a lot.
Which is more expensive than a lot of these guys, but not that much more expensive than a good number of them. So, and if you read either Rythbryt or my reviews of things, we approach the cost way of evaluating these guys differently. Mine was straight up points divided by a number.
Yep.
And he gets a low score for cost, but no one was scoring very high once you got past about AM or if you cost more than 150 points, you weren't getting points. Very, very few. And I know yours was points efficiency, not like the actual cost. Of what value are you getting?
I know people say he's expensive. He is expensive. I've played with him quite a bit getting ready for the next tournament. I think he's a good value for the points that you spend. Just the 6-inch banner on top of the mighty hero, like just those two things. Like if you're trying to replicate that in any other faction, like like Rohan tries to replicate it, with Gambling's banner, but then you got to get other banners to do it. Like Boromir is trying to replicate it. He's like not that many more points. He's like 25 more points than Boromir.
Yeah.
And you basically have the same might, but you pick up the you
get the Elven-made weapon.
You get the Elven-made weapon and Anduril. Like that's
crazy.
that's value. That's tremendous value. So he can do basically he can't lock down other enemy heroes with magic, but anything else you need him to do, he can do it.
All game long.
All game long.
And like we talked about with Glorfindel a moment ago, 3 Fate and Horse Lord.
Yep.
Keep that horse alive.
Yep.
So like Glorfindel, you're probably arriving alive.
Mm-hmm.
And like Strider, you're probably arriving alive. And at that point, it's like, someone's got to do his big weakness. A lot of people in the community talk about it. He is vulnerable to magic.
He is.
Like almost
Like
all
almost
the
all of
heroes we've
these guys
talked
are,
about,
yep.
so that's not a big critique.
But
you can run him with Gandalf the
you
White.
can. That makes
At
sense.
which point he can have Fortified Spirit, could be even channeled Fortified Spirit, and he will be fine.
Or Gladriel.
Or Galadriel.
Gladriel from the White Castle.
If you don't need the
Yep.
+1 courage, which you probably don't.
Yep. Bring
there you
Gladriel.
go. Bring Galadriel.
Problem solved.
The other thing to keep in mind too about him is that, like, unlike a lot of the other heroes, where, for example, for Treebeard, you probably don't want to lose your army bonus because his effectiveness goes down quite a bit, especially his magical resilience goes down quite a bit if you do that. For Gwaihir, you probably don't want to lose it. For LSR, if you do happen to lose your army bonus, you're probably still okay.
Yeah.
So it opens up a lot of other options for the teaming in of people to be able to cover his weaknesses, and that is just huge. That just it changes a lot about his effectiveness on the battlefield.
Yeah.
And I will put in, I think a lot of people in the community are perfectly okay giving up Gwaihir's army bonus. But Gwaihir can get good.
Yeah, you don't need it
Gwaihir,
necessarily.
Like Rohan, if you're going to get strength +1 on the charge, that's good.
Yeah.
Right? It can help. But Gwaihir's one of those models that's like, well, I got 150 points left over. Let's add the bird.
Yeah. He's still good without the bonus.
Yeah.
He's really good.
Yeah.
But, he's even Gwaihir, I don't think is as good as Aragorn.
Yeah.
I think most people would agree. I mean, the thing that you get for him, the knock on him is the cost.
Mhm.
He's a lot cheaper than he's a decent bit cheaper than he used to be. I don't think he's a
He
lot
used to
cheaper
be
than he used to
275 when
Now it's
fully kitted
240.
out. And now
Yeah.
it's
240 on the
That's good.
horse, right,
But
with the sword.
35 point savings, that's good.
Yeah.
You know.
You're basically getting most of the sword for free.
Yeah, most of it, basically. Well, especially when you factor in the 6-inch banner radius.
Yeah, and you pick up the banner. You pick up the banner. That 6-inch
So
banner is
ridiculous.
big. That was the biggest thing when I was playing with him. You can bring the full warband of 18 guys. Warbands for Minas Tirith at 18 guys don't have to be super expensive.
Yeah.
Like you can field a full warband with him at 400, and I mean you can do it as low as under 400.
Yeah.
You know, if you take your mix of knights and get some rangers for shooting or citadel guard with shooting, and then take some fountain court with him for high defense, you can get a very good 18 model warband for under 450. That's a very solid core. Add another 300 points of whatever, and you're in good shape.
One final note, just because we've talked about Underhill a little bit, I just want to make one final note here because I think this is useful. I've been talking a lot about how reliable somebody is. And so, of course, it's not going to be surprising that the Underhill guys rank really high. Even if, because we mentioned you're weak to magic, even if a whole bunch of Angmar or shamans wither you down to a strength of 1, you can still wound anybody in the game on a 3+ if you want to. That is just like a ridiculous amount of killing power. And so, well, we've talked about how great it is. Like, I just want you to realize just how great this is. At strength 1, tilde levels of strength, he can wound somebody on a 3+ if he wants to.
He can wound the Balrog.
Yes,
anybody
on
anyone
wants on 3s. That is.
It's an element made weapon. You bypass blubber. You
Yes.
bypass all this
Right.
stupid freaky stuff that some of the models have. Yeah. I do want to say as well on the magic, I think it's worth noting, right? So like there are some models where if they're transfixed or whatever, their effectiveness goes down. Certainly you don't want Aragorn to be transfixed, but because this Aragorn has the 6-inch banner bonus, he's not entirely useless.
Yeah.
If he's transfixed, just like the Witch King, if he happens to be transfixed or any Wraith.
Yeah.
They've got the Harbinger bubble that they're putting up to doing other stuff for you. Because you have the free might point of return, it's actually very hard to be consistently transfixed because you're always pressuring to move first and tie up the caster. And because you have Underhill and you're on a horse, you can generally get to the caster as long as you can shrug off a turn or two. You just need to get a couple of them shrugged off, which you can do, and you can clear that path, and your troop quality is better and everything. So you can make it work, and it's and especially if you get a secondary threat in the force like Huron. He's a great mix for him who made this list. You can, or even Knights of the White Tower. Love fighting around with Aragorn because he's got that enormous banner bubble that just buffs them, and they're clearing out everything. And I mean, Aragorn with 2 Knights of the White Tower is 360 points of heroes with, was that 42 warrior slots. You could do a lot worse with 360 points of heroes.
So that is
it.
Long, exhausting lab.
We did it.
The top 50 became 65 slayers for the forces of good.
Yeah.
At some point when we have recovered, we will tackle the top 50 turned into more forces of evil.
We're going to do it. We've done it.
And oh my, it is quite the list.
Yes, it is. I will say that the nice thing with the good models is that they do tend to build on each other. Like you get like the fight 5s, and then you get the fight 6s, and then you get the fight 5s and the 6s on horses, and then you get the fight 5s and 6s and 7s, and then you get the 2 wounds, then you got like, all this other stuff, and it sort of scales. Evil does not really scale. Evil is all over the place. Some of them have might, some of them do not. Some of them have 1 attack, some of them have 6, some of them have, and it's just sort of all over the place. The top is where you think the top's going to be.
Yeah.
But
everything below that.
Everything below the top
5, I think.
10, I'd say. Like I feel like there was a clear like top 12 or 13, and then everything else is just it's hard to rank.
For me, I confess there was kind of a pretty clear dividing line. It was around number 15.
15, yeah.
Where the top 15 were obviously the people that you expected to be, plus a bunch of flyers.
Yeah.
And then from 16 onwards, it was, I guess I feel like it's this guy.
Yeah.
I literally at one point gave up on the math and I just said, I'm just going to go by gut instinct. I think it's this guy. And I just kind of went there. And there are a few exceptions randomly in there which are non-flyers.
Yeah.
But
I mean, you've got man size
flying people plus 2 innate flying people, and that's already, I mean, that's 12.
That's 12. Yeah.
And they've all got the monster rules.
Yeah, all got monster rules, yeah.
And then there's the other monsters that don't fly that also are
Yeah.
monstrous people. So like
I mean, look, you've got monsters with no stats at all. Like they're not
Yes.
heroes. You've got man-sized models who can strike but can't mount things. You've got guys on mounts who can't strike. You got monsters with 1 might, monsters with 3 might,
monsters who don't have might, but
Lots of
lots
monsters.
of attacks.
There are a
and
lot of
great
monsters.
ability to wound stuff. So like
Yeah.
just there were so many different things. I felt like at a point I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna pass over some of the best heroes for a lot of factions just because they don't meet like 3 requirements. And
So
that's how it went.
come back.
More to come.
More to come. More to come. More to come.
Word of wisdom for the day. Smeagol can kill Nazgul.
Really?
Yes. So my son discovered Quest of the Ring Bearer, and he decided that it would be more fun, instead of doing points match games, to find random scenarios to play. So the other day I had the great fun and joy of trying to get Frodo, Sam, and Smeagol through the Dead Marshes, where there are 6 Sentinel dead guys and a Fell Beast.
Oh, that's fun.
And you know what the funny thing is about fighting Sentinels who don't alert each other that things are? You're like, oh, this is easy. I will just go and gronk 1 dead Mars Spectre at a time. Well, it turns out that having a Fell Beast Ring Wraith charge you, because he gets to move on his own full move wherever he wants 2 turns in a row. You're like, oh, how do I deal with this? Not with a strength 2 Sam.
Sure.
That's not going to work. I'm not going to do it with a strength 3 Frodo either. But I can do it with a strength 4 Gollum, who gets 2 attacks, 4 dice when you trap, and has a might. Unfortunately, I never got a chance to, because Gollum couldn't charge the dang thing.
I thought you said you killed him.
No, I didn't. But my son then played against himself later.
Oh, and he did.
And managed it handily.
Okay.
So it turns out Smeagol can kill Nazgul.
All right.
There we go. Something no one knew. I didn't know it.
Yes.
Till we figured it out. So there you go. Word of wisdom for the day. Take Smeagol. 30 points. You're a Nazgul killer.
And with that,
See us off. Ciao.